visited the location of the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, and I wanted to share with you what I saw. December 20th, 1901, ground is broken. April 30th, 1904 was opening day. All of this is just a visual, is showing you what all they built in that time frame. If you don't want to do the math, that's 862 days.
Can I prove we are a new civilization living among old world buildings in a single video? No way that all Capitol buildings look exactly the same, that they all have a different architect, right? All right, here we are at the Texas State Capitol. The Capitol was made in 1988. It was constructed largely by a bunch of convicts or migrant workers. There's a bunch of convicts building this. This only took 6 years and 10 months to build. This only took 6 years and 10 months to build. Did they have power tools in 1885? No, they did not. That didn't come until 1895. So 10 years before the power tool, they were able to construct this with convicts. All right, so here we are with the Mississippi State Capitol. And the history of it says that there were 14 architects that submitted plans in response to the architectural contest and advertised through newspapers. Okay, so there was a contest to see who would make sure that this thing was going to get built. And a bunch of architects, 14 of them, submitted plans. And of course, they picked the winner. And they chose Theodore C. Link of St. Louis, Missouri. He won the contest. Obviously, this is going to look different than all the other ones because it's a contest, right? So let's take a look at it. Of course it will. Let's reveal what it looks like. Oh, nope. It's exactly the same. I don't know how that works, but we run a contest with 14 people, and this guy just draws up this exact same structure that we're looking at all over the United States. Okay, here we are with the Arkansas State Capitol. And let's see who built this. Oh, it was a bunch of prisoners.
The Westminster Castle, also known as the Pillar of Fire, located in Westminster, Colorado, USA. The mainstream history is telling all of us that they built this structure in 1893, but then didn't occupy it for 15 years. They just built it and then left it there in the dirt, in the middle of nowhere, until 1908. And this all makes total sense. Something that just happens all the time in real world scenarios. All of our towns are just out there knocking out castle buildings that just don't need to be used for 15 years, telling us that this building was completed in 1893. But due to the panic of 1893, they just didn't get around to using it. This panic of 1893 was an economic depression. It only lasted 8 months, not 15 years. And why do I think that they just found this castle in the middle of nowhere in 1893 and didn't start using it until 15 years later? Is it because nobody even lived here in 1893? Take a look at this 1912 picture. These people are so out of place. There's literally dirt on the ground with this massive palace structure in the background that's about to be put back to use. Let's take a look at Westminster, Colorado's population. In 1911, not 1893 when the building was supposedly built, 1911, 18 years after this building was constructed, supposedly, the new city's population was 176 people in 1911. And half of these people, half of 176, they were babies. This is shocking. These people did not build this building. Not only this, but Westminster, Colorado didn't even exist as a city when this building was supposedly constructed. The area was primarily dirt and mud and was not incorporated until 1911. Oh, and did we all know this? That the vast majority of the 1890 U.S. federal census records, the population totals, those records were supposedly all destroyed by a fire in 1933. We are totally lied to about our past. This is insane. The mainstream history, the narrative that we've all been told in our reading in classrooms, they just burned all of its population totals. Are you kidding me?
This is the Wisconsin State Capitol, and it was supposedly built between 1906 and 1917 in a city with a population of only around 30,000 people. Think about that, 30,000 people, a small Midwestern city surrounded by farms. Yet somehow they constructed one of the most elaborate government buildings in the United States. The building contains stone from 6 different countries, more than 40 different types of stone, marble from Europe, granite from around the world, materials that had to be quarried, transported, carved, and assembled more than a century ago. And then there's the dome, the only granite dome on any state capitol building in America, a structure so massive it contains roughly 2,500 tons of steel. According to history, all of that was lifted into place in the early 1900s, but the building itself raises even more questions. Walk inside, the marble, the gold, the towering columns, the massive rotunda stretching stories into the air. It doesn't feel like a government office. It feels more like a cathedral, like something built to inspire awe. And then there's the architect, George B. Post, the same man connected to the enormous buildings of the 1893 World's Fair, a name that appears again and again whenever these seemingly impossible structures show up. So the question is, how does a city of only 30,000 people fund, supply, and construct something like this? Because when you look at buildings like the Wisconsin State Capitol, it starts to feel like there may be a chapter of history we're still missing.
Let's talk about the World Fairs. Why were we never taught about them? Why did Lake Chicago look like ancient Greece? Are we really supposed to believe those clearly stone buildings were all made from paper mache and potato bags? These expos were going on worldwide, supposedly creating hundreds of temporary buildings year after year with just horse and buggy. They tell us these enormous structures were built in, give or take, 2 years, only to be ended with barbaric desecration 6 months later. But let's take a closer look. Their narrative is immediately contradicted per usual, as we see multiple buildings from these fairs still remaining today. How would anyone in their right mind believe this is temporary? And then take a look at Buffalo, New York, 1901. Where's the blueprints? Who supplied all the materials? What equipment was used to lift these massive granite statues? How are their entire canals and bridges being held by plaster? Something easily broken down by weight and water. And then we have some expos in the middle of nowhere, like St. Louis. No airports, nothing. Still didn't stop 20 million people from visiting. Are we to think millions traveled the sea on boats? Not to mention the planning, the preparation, materials required to accommodate 20 million in sanitation, plumbing, food, and so on. And then we have the exposition in Paris. Does this look temporary to you? Many of these buildings already indicate signs of aging. You can really see the weathering on it. Does that look 6 months old, let alone a few years? No, these are hundreds. These fairs held multiple segmented areas to showcase fine arts, science, the latest inventions, including human zoos and incubator babies. We even have an introduction to pus and mucus foods like hot dogs and hamburgers, including a cultural rise in beer. Maybe they're testing the fluoride. To me, these fairs were basically worldwide indoctrination points to our modern thinking, conducted by the powers that be to hide already previously established cities of an earlier civilization as mere temporary attractions. And to anyone thinking these are temporary, look at some more photos of these expos. Oh wait, the bottom is St. Peter's Basilica in the Vatican, more than 400 years old. Nothing about the official story regarding these worldwide expos adds up. And the only logical explanation is that what you're looking at is pre-existing architecture of the old world, repurposed to fit a new narrative, brainwashing the millions just like they do in the media today. The buildings were built, but when? They were anything but temporary and destroyed for a reason.
The 1st of May 1893, Chicago, Illinois. The gates officially opened to a sprawling, impossible empire of neoclassical stone. In the late 19th century, a phenomenon swept across America that defies all logical explanation. Over 27 million people traveled to this exact location within 6 months. They came to witness the world's fairs, massive empires of impossible architecture that appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Textbooks claim these magnificent structures were built in a matter of months, specifically for this 1,893 event, using nothing but horse-drawn carts, plaster, and hemp. But newly unclassified documents suggest a massive deception. The official blueprints weren't drawn to build the fair, they were drawn to map out what they had just dug up. Look at the scale. These weren't temporary pavilions, they were megalithic stone monuments. Domes that rivaled the Vatican, intricate columns the size of redwood trees, all supposedly constructed by men who didn't even have power tools. The official narrative tells us it was a celebration of progress, but the archival photographs reveal a very different reality. If you look closely at the degraded images, you can see the cheap plaster chipping away, revealing ancient, solid, precision-cut stone blocks underneath. They didn't build it, they just gave it a fresh coat of paint. Notice the impossible proportions. The doorways were designed for beings twice our size. And then there was the lighting. Millions of perfectly synchronized electric bulbs illuminating the night sky decades before the public grid could support it. They weren't generating this power. They were harvesting it from the atmosphere, using old-world technology that they were about to erase forever. Deep in the flooded sub-basements, investigators found massive disconnected cables. The wiring belonged to a grid that had been shut off long before 1893. But to keep the public distracted from this impossible architecture, the organizers created bizarre, deeply unsettling spectacles. Among the exhibits, right next to the freak shows, they displayed living infants in glass boxes. Incubator babies, they called them. People paid admission to stare at thousands of nameless infants. But where did they all come from? Archival logs show lines of older orphans being quietly paraded through the ruins at night, preparing for their own permanent relocation. The exact same place the children on the orphan trains came from. A dark, terrifying steam train was permanently parked behind the glamorous pavilions. The fairs weren't just exhibitions. They were processing centers for the new generation and grand finales for the old world. But there was another secret being packed away. Why did the Smithsonian destroy 40,000 artifacts in the early 1900s? Because of what they found under these fairs. Giant bones, old world atmospheric tech, anomalies that shattered the timeline. Government agents quietly loaded them onto private trains under the cover of night. Because what happened next is the greatest architectural crime in human history. As soon as the millions of visitors went home, the order was given. These magnificent, impossible cities weren't preserved. They were methodically dynamited, smashed to pieces. Newspaper headlines that dared to question the rapid demolition were violently censored, crossing out the truth with black ink. They told the public they were temporary structures, posing a fire hazard, and then intentionally burned them to the ground. But you don't use heavy explosives and iron wrecking balls to take down plaster and wood. You use them to destroy solid stone. The shattered remains of the old world's greatest statues were left face down in the mud, deliberately destroyed so they could never be studied. To hide the evidence permanently, millions of tons of stone rubble were quietly dumped into Lake Michigan and buried under the shoreline. Within months, hundreds of acres of ancient Tartarian architecture were turned into ash and rubble. They didn't build the world's fairs. They found them, dug them out, dressed them up as a temporary show, and then destroyed the evidence. Even the grand water canals, which mirrored the ancient cities of Europe, were hastily filled with dirt to erase the waterways forever. The financial elite threw a farewell party for the old world and charged the public admission to watch it burn. The erasure of our true architectural heritage was complete, replaced by empty parks and artificial lakes. The next time you walk through a city park, ask yourself, what magnificent structures used to stand exactly where you are standing? Share this film before the platforms take it down. Hit subscribe, because the truth about the mud floods is deeper than you think.
Hello guys, David Vos here. We're having another beautiful day here in Red Mesa, New Mexico. It's a nice summer day. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Well, you saw the clips that we showed you, and it's impressive. But, you know, it's hard to just accept that everything we've been told is a lie. You know, when we found out that we didn't go to the moon, and we found out that it was all filmed in Hollywood, and we began to look at it and we said, oh, well, that makes sense because, you know, that's a pretty poor photography and just all the anomalies and things that we know now. There's too much evidence. We did not go to the moon, or at least we did not film it. And all the stars and the planets and the heavens that we see, all the pictures of the Earth looking back, they're all CGI. So it begins to make one wonder. I did an entire video yesterday about nanotechnology and looking at a microscopic picture of little nano construction, and we dug into it and found out it's all fake. It's just all pictures, and there's no actual nanotechnology. And we begin to really stop and wonder what's going on. You've probably seen all of these pictures on TikTok and YouTube. There's a few people that are talking about this. It comes in different captions, the Tartarians or the mud flood or something. It's pretty convincing, but it doesn't prove anything. And I've looked at several of them, a lot of them. It just leaves one completely astounded and wondering. And you might think, well, I believe this must be fake. But I want proof. See, a lot of you may think it's just good enough to say, look at that building. Nobody could have built that in 1880 or whatever. And or the Chicago one is the one that's been documented the most. The St. Louis one, a few others. There's one in Buffalo. It's pretty crazy. The San Francisco one. You know, a lot of these original cities that were built for these world fairs, it just leaves one totally wondering. And a lot of people will probably say, I don't believe it. I don't think we did it. But then we have to ask, okay, so what's going on and what are they hiding and what you know, how could the United States in 1850 and 1880 and 1890 and all up until World War I, how could any of that have just been forgotten? Wouldn't there somebody that would have left a picture or some proof? And if not, would there be some books that would reveal this mess? I mean, what's going on? So today I'm going to start not just showing you pictures, and a lot of people are doing that, and they're giving some evidence, and maybe some circumstantial evidence for one building or another building. But I want to share with you something today that I think conclusively proves that there were literally massive buildings, cities, cathedrals, theaters, capitals, whatever these capitals were. They don't even, you know, there's certainly Greco-Roman style buildings. It primarily in the eastern part of the United States, it seems to be Greco-Roman kind of Athenian buildings. A lot of the buildings in the western part of the United States that they just found when they got there, that we have no pictures of their construction, like the Great Salt Lake Mormon Temple, which is very Viking looking. It's very Gothic. And you get to looking at a lot of the buildings in the western part of the United States that look more Gothic. Even the pictures we see of San Francisco, and there were a lot of supposedly insane asylums that were in the San Francisco area or out by Napa Valley that looked more Gothic, not really so much Athenian, but different. There's definitely a different style. Yes, there might be more Spanish influence there, but certainly a different influence. But massive. And so instead of just relying on what if and how could it be and I'm amazed and I don't know what to think, I determined to ask AI to show me something, some proof, any proof. And they couldn't show me one picture, one photograph. Now, a lot of you might say, yeah, but hold on, Dave, hold on. They didn't have photographs back then. No, that's not actually true. The dates that we're talking about with the Chicago Fair, the World Fairs, and all the St. Louis and all stuff that was burned down, most of this happened in 1890s. Some of it was after that slightly. And it's interesting, all this happens before World War I, because World War I was a reset. We know that millions of people around the world died. 55 million people in the influenza epidemic in 1918. By the end of the war, we had a famine that came along after that in the 20s. But the war itself all over the world was devastating. We see these orphan trains. We see all the children that were left without fathers and mothers. We know that prior to that, we had the Huguenot Inquisition. We had the massive inquisitions of murders and millions of people being driven out of Europe and coming here to America and establishing the Constitution and the 13 colonies. But until later on, I mean, it was some time later that people started going west. Remember the 1840s? That's not that far from 1776. So it took a while. And there evidently weren't really any pictures before 1839. And maybe we could say, okay, before 1840, 1850. We'll let that go. Even if there were cameras, might not be any or a lot of pictures that we could find at that point. But after 1850, we've got to say there should be some photographs, especially if they're going to build a massive cathedral or capitol building in cities that don't have any populations. There's these, 10 people and a mule that go out there and build these things? It doesn't make sense, but we need photographic evidence. So I asked AI, what year did the photography come to America? Let alone the world, right? And they said that photography arrived in the United States in the fall of 1839, shortly after word of Louis Jacques Mande Daguerre, his invention reached American shores. Philadelphian Joseph Saxton improvised a camera from a cigar box to take the oldest surviving photograph in America. That's 1839. But then I said, yeah, but were there photos of New York, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Georgia, Boston, St. Louis, and all the other cities in the 1850s and onward? And they said, yes, extensive photographic records exist for all these major American cities from the 1850s. Okay, I'd just like to see one from 1890, because a lot of these buildings are supposedly supposedly built. They say they were founded, but all right, let's pretend that just means built. They were all supposedly built for world fairs in 1880, 90 or something. But let's go all the way back to 1850 and beyond, and let's find they say American cities from the 1850s, extensive records captured primarily via daguerreotypes and early paper prints. By 1850, commercial photography galleries were highly successful fixtures in major urban centers. City by city, they say, historical images can be provided. New York City, 1850, shows Broadway between Franklin and Leonard Streets. And another from roughly 1853 documents the Catherine Street. Detailed records of the 19th century Manhattan buildings can be seen in the collections like the Old New York and Early Photography. We got Philadelphia buildings on the nation's earliest 1839 snapshot. Photographer Frederick D. Borg Richards extensively documented Philadelphia's aging architectural landmarks in 1850, including the famous intersection of 2nd and Chestnut Streets. In St. Louis, renowned photographer Thomas Martin Easterly amassed a massive portfolio of St. Louis in the 1850s. His surviving work includes the St. Louis Levee Pact with Mississippi steamboats in 1852 and Chateau Pond in 1850 and various city streetscapes. Atlanta, because Atlanta was a young, rapidly growing railroad hub in the 1850s, surviving images from the exact decades are rarer but do exist. The Atlanta History Center preserves early portraits and street views beginning around 1850, right before the city was heavily photographed during its Civil War occupation. So it was heavily photographed by the Civil War. 1866? We're talking about just a few pictures from 1890, please. And they say it was heavily photographed in the Civil War. And that's Atlanta, Georgia, that didn't have as many pictures as New York or Philadelphia or St. Louis or Chicago. Boston, they say, while the famous aerial view of Boston from a hot air balloon wasn't captured until 1860, numerous street-level pictures of Boston's wharfs, residences, and markets were taken throughout the late 1840s and the 1850s. And they say, why ghost towns? If you look at city photographs of the 1850s, and the streets often appear mysteriously empty, or they show blurry, transparent ghost figures. Well, this is not due to a lack of population, but rather a limitation of the technology. Okay, well, that's wonderful. So I say, do we have photos, though, please, of the construction of the massive Capitol buildings in each city, cathedrals, and theaters of any cities from the 1850s on? Many were built around 1880, 1890, and later. What photos do we have of their construction? Any of them, even in 19-something. Because if we could prove that they built it in 1914, well, they might have had that same technology in 1890. But they can't show any of these big buildings being built. But they say, yes, we have an incredibly high detailed photographic record, and it goes on and on of construction, major capitals and cathedrals and theaters from 1850s through the Gilded Age, the 1880s to the 1890s and beyond. Because these were massive, decades-long civic engineering feats, they coincided perfectly with the rise of the commercial photography, mobile darkrooms, and structural documentation. The types of photos preserved across major archives illustrate how these historic landmarks were built. Because capitals were ultimate symbols of civic pride, governments routinely hired photographers to document their progress, stage by stage. Oh, wonderful. I can't wait till we get to see all these pictures. Stage by stage, right? Massive portfolios and extensive photography we're going to see here in a minute, right? Okay. So the United States Capitol Dome, 1855 to 1866. This is one of the most thoroughly photographed mid-19th century construction projects. Now think about this. They're telling you right now, bald-faced, bam, right out to your face. They're saying the U.S. Capitol and the Dome was built in 1855 to 1866, and it is one of the most thoroughly photographed mid-19th century construction projects in the world. And yet you're going to find that there's not one picture of its construction. Not one. They will show you links and say, this is proof, and here's the construction picture, and it's not there. It is not there. It's a fully built dome and Capitol. There is no construction pictures. They just keep on saying it. It's like some kind of, remember how Trump will always keep saying things over and over again, even if it's not true? Because it's what they believe. If they keep saying it, you'll believe it. But they have no proof. There is not one picture. I've spent hours trying to find any evidence whatsoever, and I'm going to show you my endeavor here today. But they say that dozens of famous photos exist showing the U.S. Capitol building under construction during the Civil War. You can see a massive hollow cast iron skeletal ribs of the dome rising over the city, surrounded by massive wooden derrick cranes, scaffolding, and marble blocks. Well, see, they give it away right there. What they say is that they're showing you pictures of them remodeling the dome, right? Scaffolding and so forth. But there's a building there, the whole building, the whole Capitol, and they're going up with a dome, either reconstructing the dome or, maybe adding plaster or marble work or something. Remodeling, maybe, but certainly not one picture of its construction. So then they say the Texas State Capitol in 1882 and 1888. An extensive collection of photographs captures the building of this massive pink granite structure in Austin. Photos show the construction of its dedicated railroad line used to haul the stone, the massive iron framework of the dome, and hundreds of stone cutters, many of whom were convicts working on site. Well, that's funny. Why, you're going to build this massive, intricate architecture, and you're going to build it with convicts, thieves, murderers, convicts. They don't know anything about construction. How do they build this thing in a couple of years? They don't even have power tools. The whole thing is ridiculous. Going on down, the other late 19th century capitals. We've got construction photo series for the California State Capitol. We've got through the 1860s to the 1870s, the New York State Capitol in Albany, 1867 to 1899. We got the Minnesota State Capitol. Okay, just show me one, right? You think they just, here's a link, man. Let's get this out of the way. Let's get this conspiracy squashed right here. So here we go. Grand Cathedral, St. Patrick's Cathedral. Well, it's all built. They show you pictures of the whole thing fully built. There's not one picture here, and there's no links, but trust me, I've gone through every link they've sent me, and there's not one link of any of these being constructed. The Washington National Cathedral. We've got grand theaters and opera houses, the 1880s, 1890s, the Auditorium Building, Chicago, 1887, Metropolis. They tell you all this stuff, but they don't give you any proof. So then down here it says Library of Congress. Well, we click on that and it just goes round and round and round and won't load. It's security checks and it just won't load. And when I finally did go another route and see whatever it is that they were supposedly trying to show me, there's not one picture in the Library of Congress. I guarantee it. Not one picture of any construction. The best you can do is you'll see scaffolding on a fully built building with a little bit of, maybe remodeling at the top of a peak or something. Maybe they're adding a spiraling radio tower to it or something. Or maybe they're making a statue and adding it to the peak or something. But nowhere do they have any construction photos. We go on down and I say, well, I went to the sites you gave and I can find no photos of these massive buildings being constructed. I see only a few more modern constructions of side buildings or remodeling or renovations. No photos of the foundations being laid or any building to see that the building didn't already exist beforehand. Can you show any links to the foundations of these massive buildings in the earliest times, 1850s, or when they were said to have begun with foundations being laid? And they said, well, the reason it can be frustratingly difficult, remember before they said, it's extensive. We got a whole series and libraries of photos, right? But they never gave them to me. Then I challenged them and now they're like, well, it's frustrating and it's difficult to find these photos on generic search pages because most of the search engines default to showing the most famous, iconic angles, which usually feature, instead of just going on with your bullcrap, just show me a link. You said there was plenty of pictures somewhere. If you can't show me one diggity dadgum link of one diggity dadgum building being diggity dadgum built, then I think you're diggity dadgum stupid. And that's the way I feel about it. So I gave them all the chances in the world, and I kept on, and they come down here and they give me this Albany Capital Found. I went on to that one, and it comes out to this: just some people talking, and there's a painting, not of a building that's like a cathedral, but just some wooden building, and that's it, man. And so that was a dud. They go, oh, how about the St. Patrick's Cathedral in New York? Okay, let's go check that one out. Oh, there you go. Fully built building. What? There's some 3 guys in some, like, I don't know, they're out there in some dirty old overalls or something. There's no cars. There's no other people. It's all dirt, right? But they got this massive cathedral, all built. And they claim this is the construction picture. And that's it. Okay, how about the Michigan State Capitol, Lansing, Michigan? Well, let's go there and check that out. Okay. Well, there we go. A fully and completely finished building. And that's the picture that they want you to see. But maybe there's something down here. We'll keep looking. Nope. That's the same building we saw, it looks like. And it's completely built. Right? And look at the foreground. Some crude other buildings laying around and no skyscraper. It's just very few people who ever lived in this area. But right there is this huge, massive cathedral, and nobody seems to know why. No construction pictures. There's the dome inside, but it's fully built. There's a guy on a ladder painting something, but no construction. I guarantee it. All right, so how about the next one? Illinois State Capitol, Springfield, Illinois. Click on that one. It almost looks like the same place that we just visited. It is. Okay, that ain't it. That's Illinois' House of Republicans historic record. So I say, I clicked the links you sent. There are literally no pictures of any foundation or structure, construction on any of the buildings. I'm really thinking there are none. Can you please send any links you have available of the actual construction from the foundation of any of the early massive capitals or cathedrals or theaters or any other temples or whatever in the United States of America from the 1850s to the 1890s? Now, remember, guys, this is AI. This is like the digital god. This is the most highly intelligent possible way that you could determine anything. They know everything. Right? They know how far it is to the tiniest little speck of light in yonder heavens. And they know whether there's water on a planet there. They know the temperature on Saturn, Mars, Venus. They know the gaseous contents. They know what the sun's doing and what kind of light it's making and how it makes the light and what causes the reason for us to fall to the earth and spin around rotating and and all the knowledge that's all been done in all the world ever since time began. It's all been cataloged and they got it all. And it's not just that they say they don't have pictures to show us. They say they do, but they can't produce one. Not one. So in other words, they know that if there ain't no pictures, it ain't real. So they got to say there are pictures. They just can't find one right at the moment. Right? Try back in an hour. Well, I've been trying for hours and there are no pictures. And why don't they just say we don't got any pictures? Because if they said that, they'd know, and everybody would know that they're lying because they had cameras and they have pictures of horses and trees and mountains and Yosemite Park and, everything, the oceans and the ships and the sailors and they got pictures of everything. Even the buildings after they're already built, but they ain't got none. Not one picture where they are laying the foundation or building a wall or a window on the wall or anything. Nothing. I keep that in mind. And they said, well, it's completely understandable to feel skeptical. The previous third-party platform links did not directly display the rare, unedited, now they're rare, before they were extensive, right? Series of extensive photographic files, and it's the most well-documented, construction of the Capitol and all this stuff they were saying. But now it's, they were rare and unedited excavation files. That's hard to come by. Finding photographic evidence of the absolute earliest stages of construction, the 1850s to 1890s. Specifically, the open dirt pits, trenches, and the foundation stone laying. Just give me one that shows a wall going up. I don't need trenches and foundation stones necessarily. I'd like to see that too. I mean, you'd think they'd snap a shot of the laying of a foundation, right? Where we could see that this building didn't exist before they built it. But no. They can't even give you a picture of the wall or a window going in the side of the Capitol or anything. But it says it requires navigation, government and academic digital repositories where raw glass plate negatives are officially cataloged. The primary historical documents from official state and federal database definitely prove these massive buildings were built step by step from the raw earth. Then we have this Library of Congress, which I've clicked at 100 times. It will not load. It goes to a security service. They check to see if you're real or if you're not a robot or something. And I can't, it just goes. I spent 20 minutes already trying to get on and I can't. And then we've got this other one, Skeletal Phase, the Library of Congress. I think I tried that one. I don't remember now. Okay, there it is. That one loads and there's their proof. This is the proof. Oh, okay, right on the side there is a picture. What do we got there? There's their picture. There's the proof. You see, fully complete, and they're just doing a little remodeling of the very top. And that's their proof. That's all they got. So, how about the California State Library Historical Catalog? Oh, pictures of books. We've got a picture of a document. Little children. Nothing. There are no pictures. Oh, there's Johnny Cash. He went to Folsom Prison, but they got all kind of things, but they ain't got no construction pictures. How about the structural breakdown? You can navigate this architecture collection. All right, there we go. That's quite a collection there, isn't it? Trust me, I've looked all over and clicked everything I can find. There's not a picture. There's not a link. There's nothing here. There's not even a little bit of, anything. That's a drawing, right? This is ridiculous. All right. So, the only pictures you ever see is the ones they show you. There's that picture again, right? That's all they got of one picture of a Capitol. So I say none of these sites show any early construction. Links saying proof of construction lead to drawings, paintings, and later fully finished buildings. There doesn't seem to be any actual pictures of construction for any of America's buildings. I'm sure if there were, I would see some somewhere. Or you could provide a link to verify this. And they said, well, it's completely fair to be frustrated, especially when links don't immediately load or direct images of the excavation work you are asking to see. Because public web links frequently change or map to general gallery landing pages rather than the exact subfile. They can easily look like modern filler or misleading artwork. Photographs of raw foundations, open dirt pits, and deep excavations of these massive buildings absolutely exist. They are permanently preserved as public domain glass plate negatives. The public links below go directly to the unedited historical black and white photography hosted by public archives that show these foundations and structures. Okay, great. Let's go to the first one. What do we got? Tick tock, doo, 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 doo. La 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 la. We're waiting. Well, that site can't be reached, and I tried reloading it 100 times. It just can't be reached, guys. I'm sorry about that. So, U.S. Capitol Dome, a skeletal structure. It's the same one we've seen. Here's the Federal Building Foundation construction record. Oh, there you go. What is that? A foundation of the Department of Justice, 1932. Well, that's not a cathedral. There's a photograph of the U.S. General Service Administration Building, November 23rd, 1915. I don't see any cathedrals. Do you? Or, like that's too late and there's no, we're not talking about the Capitol or anything. There's some more modern 1933 building. I don't know what that is. There's December 31st, 1928. Says photograph of the Department of Commerce building being constructed. I don't even know what that building is that they're trying to show us, but this one's 1929. And there's one from 1928, but it's already built. This massive cathedral standing there. And that's it. That's all she wrote. And they said how to find hundreds more. Oh, hundreds more. Go directly to the Library of Congress. Well, I tried that. All righty, there we go. Library of Congress. What do we got? No construction building pictures at all whatsoever. Right? Nothing. Isn't that handy dandy? Go right to the site that tells you nothing. Oh, there's a drawing of one. Nothing. They got pictures of the first American airplane, but they can't give you a picture of the first construction of any of our buildings. Not even our Capitol. Not the Mormon temple in Utah either. So I said, the Library of Congress will not load. And I spent 20 minutes loading and it fails to load. The next link you send does not show any construction of any actual cathedral, like buildings or capitals. It's not photos of a capitol. It's just more modern buildings and one cathedral already built. It seems there are none. I'm sorry. They said, well, I completely understand your frustration, and you do not need to apologize at all. It's incredibly annoying when links fail to load, or when you click a link expecting to see a raw foundation and instead get a modern building or a finished cathedral. Well, if you sent the link, don't you think you should have already known what was on there before you sent it to me when you said there was extensive files of all these photographs and you haven't showed me any? The issue with many of these archival links is that they rely on heavy, outdated database viewers that frequently crash, time out, or redirect to generic main pages. So to bypass all of that, they're going to give me a link here to the U.S. Capitol building completely hollow in 1860. Well, there's no link there. And then they give me a massive cathedral in half-built ruins, 1881. No link. A Golden Age Capitol building rising from the dirt, 1898. No link. Why does it feel like those photos are hidden? Okay, so I say, but there are no links provided in the last one. They go, oh, I'm so sorry about that. That was entirely my mistake. I completely missed attaching the actual hyperlinks to the text in my last response. Oh, that's no problem. All right, hold on. They didn't provide it this time either. Just not there. No links. So again, I said, still no links. And they go, I hear you completely. It is incredibly frustrating. La 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 la. So then they send this, and I have to go like this and go like that, and then web search it and see what comes up. You ready? Here it comes. Oh, I can't wait. I'm so excited. Oh, this is great. What? That's it? Remember, it was built in 1855, and here it is, 1860, and they've got it almost finished, right? But if you look at that scaffolding, it shows the entire dome. The scaffolding rises all the way up to the top of the dome. You cannot see behind the scaffolding to see that it's not there or anything. But the rest of the building is completely and fully complete, finished. And like I said, you can't see what's going on with the dome, but I do believe that year, 1860, they were simply remodeling it or painting it or something. But this is not a picture of and besides, this is only the Capitol in 1860. They haven't showed us any other photographs of any other cathedrals or capitals or buildings anywhere else in the world. And remember, they said they're extensive. They're all over, every city. Atlanta, Georgia, New York, Philadelphia, San Francisco, St. Louis, Chicago, all of it. You see. Ridiculous. Down here is the Minnesota State Capitol. Let's take a look at that one. Web search on that one. All right, file laying the Minnesota State Capitol cornerstone. Well, that's a beauty. And how do we know where this was or that this is, I mean, we can't see anything in this picture. There's literally no proof, and this is all they got. That's it. That is the entire proof that they have that all these buildings were constructed and built at the time that they say that they were built. I don't know what that is. They claim they're laying a foundation. We don't know what's really going on in there. But that's it. And, you think, I mean, they gave us two, right? Two pictures. But, that's it. I said, I see a fully constructed Capitol there. And I believe they're adding or rebuilding a new or remodeling the dome. Not sufficient. And what about the other thousands of buildings with no pictures? I have to conclude that none of these American structures were actually built in that time. And they were already there when we got here. And they said, well, it makes complete sense why you have reached that conclusion when you are looking for specific visual proof of a massive historical claim like the construction of entire cities. And every single link or search result comes up short, dead, or just shows finished buildings. It feels like the history we are taught doesn't match reality. Well, you got it. If there are no photos of the most critical foundation stages for thousands of these buildings, questioning whether they were actually built by the 19th century Americans is a logical response. However, the conclusion that these structures were already here when Americans arrived is historically incorrect. The lack of empty mud pit photography is not due to the buildings already existing. Rather, it is a direct reflection of how human history was documented before the modern era. That's it, guys. That's all I got for you today. I'm going to do more research, and I'm going to find absolute proof. I'm going to find out what really happened. We know now that something is going on. And I'll tell you what I think it is. And I've done videos on it already. The Bible says we've already gone through the 1,000-year reign of Christ. I have shown documents that actually happened, that for 1,000 years, John, the Revelator, was actually documented to have lived. And he went to China, and he went to Africa, and he went to America. And they established, he had all of these Knights of St. John with him, and they built these cathedrals. Because remember, Jesus was a carpenter, but that don't mean a carpenter. It means a tecton, which means an architecture guy. His dad was a carpenter. And that's what they did. And Joseph of Arimathea had 10 mines and boats, and they came to America. They went to China. And that's what people are calling the Tartarian thing. And we're going to get into it. We're going to study it, and we're going to figure it out. We were lied to, and this is the little season. The only difference that you've probably been told that isn't correct on this, if you've been looking into any of this, that most people think that the little season at the end of the 1,000 years is 1,000 years after the Great Tribulation. These are preterists, and they believe that the beast that comes up out of the bottomless pit and the Antichrist and all that already occurred 1,000 years ago. And that's not true. Revelation chapter 20 talks about the beast coming up out of the bottomless pit and Gog of Magog and the great war and the great white throne judgment. That is the same judgment that we find right after the Great Tribulation. The Great Tribulation, or the little season, or the hour of her judgment, the little season. It actually calls it the little season, the short time. Jesus called it the short time. That is the little season at the end of the 1,000 years. We've already gone through the 1,000 years, and the saints have reigned in association with Christ as faithful stewards for 1,000 years already. But by the end of the 1,000 years, it says that the wicked stewards began to say, our master's delaying his second coming, and then begin to beat their fellow servants and blah, blah, blah. And we'll get into that in other videos. But what I want to really get into in the next video or so is some evidence of this massive kingdom of Christ. What did they know? What kind of technology did they have? What kind of buildings did they build? Right? And who were they? Well, they were the children of Israel. I guarantee it. I'm going to go ahead and go. Hope you have a wonderful evening. You know the Lord loves you very much. His grace and his peace will always be with you. And we will see you tomorrow. Have a good one, guys.